Hey, welcome back, guys. This is Jason, KM4ACK. Today, let's talk about this battery and my test results over the last month. Stick around and we'll get right to it. Real quick before we get going today, I've got to give a shout out to these guys. They're my latest patrons over on Patreon. If you'd like to help support the channel, I'll leave a link to Patreon down in the description below. Okay, so before we dive into the test results that I've seen over the last 30 days, I wanted to address a couple of things. First, yes, I've seen Will's review of this battery. If you guys haven't seen it, I'll leave a link to that down in the description below, and I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of this video. A couple of things that came up after the first video on this. Several people emailed me to say their batteries arrived DOA, dead on arrival. Well, I thought the same thing when I ordered my 16 amp hour battery. Now, I didn't experience this with the 8 amp hour version, but I did when the 16 amp hour version arrived. As soon as it arrived, I wanted to see its charge state out of the box, so I plugged my meter up and went to take a reading from the battery terminals, and it read 0 volts. I thought the battery might be bad. And then I got to thinking about it a little bit. Turns out just the BMS had tripped. So the batteries had discharged to a low enough voltage that the BMS disconnected from the batteries to protect the cells. The BMS was doing exactly what it was designed to do, because if we over-discharge these cells, we'll end up damaging them. After connecting mine to a charger and leaving it overnight, my 16 amp hour has been fine ever since. A couple of other things that I've heard from different operators, they were trying to run digital or CW at a high power level, so 90 or 100 watts, and they were reporting back that the BMS just couldn't deliver that much current and was tripping and disconnecting from the batteries. They would have to give it a few minutes to reset, and then they could reduce the power and carry on. I haven't seen this, but the only high power test really that I did was running the radio at 100 watts on single sideband, and we're never going to see that 20 to 21 amp draw on single sideband. But if you do try to run it on digital or CW with that much power, you might run into an issue. My testing has all been with JS8 Call at somewhere between 20 and 50 watts, and I haven't run into that BMS disconnect issue. Now, while I was testing the battery, I was using my Yaesu 891, and I had the battery connected through the Buddy Pole Power Mini. So that's not really the best test equipment probably, but it was the best that I had on hand. But let's go ahead and jump over to the spreadsheet and take a look at some of my results. Okay, so let me point out that all of these tests were conducted with the 891 running JS8 Call at 20 watts. In that setup, the receive amperage of the 891 is approximately 1 amp, and the transmit at 20 watts is roughly 7.65 amps. One other thing you'll see is occasionally in the notes it says RTD. That simply means that I ran the battery to death, or I ran it until the BMS tripped because the battery got to too low of a voltage. But if we start looking through some of this, and guys, I'm going to leave a PDF file of this spreadsheet down in the description below. If you're interested in downloading that, feel free to, and you can kind of analyze this data a little bit better after you've downloaded it. Right here on October the 29th, I was able to draw 7.49 amps out of the battery, and the ending voltage wound up being 12.53. Now, we're not going to analyze every single line of this. I'm just going to point out a few of them. I tried to vary the test up. If you notice right here on this particular day, November the 4th, I only drew about 2.79 amp hours out of it. But there were several different days. Well, here's 3 days up close to the beginning where I ran it until the BMS tripped out. So I took everything that I could get out of that battery out of it. Other days I got 8.01 amps out of it on November the 11th. Scrolling on down, you can see a couple more days where I ran it until the BMS tripped. This particular day here was another short one with only 1.4 amp hours. This day here was 50 watts of JSA call. I was doing some other testing and thought that that would be a good test to kind of hit it with a little bit more power. Ended up drawing 3.9 amp hours out of it that day. This particular day, it was simply a receive-only test, so the radio wasn't set to transmit. And you can see the results on that line. Here's another day where I was able to get over 8 amp hours out of it. And then the last date as of the recording of this video, which was December the 6th, I had a pretty long-winded JS8 call QSO at 20 watts. So the duration of the test was only 4 hours and 35 minutes, and I was able to draw 6.6 amps out of the battery that particular day. So as you can see, I've had some pretty good results with the 8 amp hour version of this battery. Now, let's talk about Will's video, because he did not give this battery very high remarks. I totally understand that. He actually has proper test equipment, and guys, I'm a huge fan of his channel and really value what he puts out and his opinion on different batteries. Honestly, had I have seen his video before purchasing my first battery like this, I might not have bought it at all. I'm kind of glad though that I didn't see his video until after I had already bought it. I think I would have been missing out on something. I've not done a teardown like he's done of the battery, so I can't speak to the workmanship inside, but again, I do trust his judgment on that, and if he says that it's less than favorable workmanship, I believe him. But really what it boils down to is budget. I think of this battery as kind of the Baofeng UV5R of the battery world. Is it the absolute best battery when you compare it to something like a Bioenno or a Dakota Lithium? Absolutely not. No more so is the receiver of the Baofeng UV5R a very good receiver when you compare it against a newer ICOM or Yaesu radio. I still own half a dozen Baofeng radios. A lot of guys that watch this channel absolutely hate that radio, but I believe that they serve a purpose. And as long as you understand their limits, I think they're great little radios. And my opinion is the same on this battery. Is it the best battery that you can buy? No. But will it get you out and get you on the air if you're on a budget? Absolutely it will. So we may only get 6 amp hours out of an 8 amp hour battery according to Will's video. But hey, it still gets you on the air, and it costs $30 versus $100 for the equivalent size of the Bioenno or the Dakota Lithium batteries. So will I recommend this battery now and in the future? Absolutely, under given circumstances. If somebody is on a budget and they're trying to put together maybe a complete HF kit and they've got a skimp somewhere, this would be a great place to save a few bucks, still be able to get on the air, and you can always upgrade later. Or maybe an operator already has one of the name brand batteries and wants something as a backup. Again, this would be a great choice. Is it equivalent? No. But if you understand its limitations and you treat it a little bit more carefully, you know, I don't know what would happen if I took this Miady battery and dropped it from 15 or 20 feet. I can tell you that about 2 weeks after purchasing my Dakota Lithium, that's exactly what happened to me. I knocked it off of a deck railing of a vacation house. It hit the ground about 20 feet or so below. It was hard-packed dirt, and it started rolling down a pretty good hill. I found the battery about 75 yards from the cabin we were staying in at the time. Picked it up, brought it back up, plugged it up, and it was still working. Would this budget battery survive that same fall? Probably not. So there are some trade-offs when you go with a budget option. It's up to each individual operator to decide what works best from them. All right, guys, I'm going to continue testing this battery for another another 60 days, which will be 90 days total. And I'll update you guys again at the end of that test. And we might even do a little torture testing with this battery. We'll see you guys on the next video.